The appraisal I just received on my real estate investment saved the whole deal. If you stick around to the end, I'm going to show you the full breakdown on the whole entire deal from purchase to refinance. So first, let's talk about how I found the property and how much I paid for it and what I used to buy it. Well, to start, it's actually the house pretty close to another house that I owned. I saw that it had been vacant for a while. I've actually tried to get a hold of the owner, never successfully could. One day I'm driving by and there they are, moving things out. So I knew nobody was living there, so it was interesting. So I just stopped and I said, "Hey, are you interested in selling?" The lady said, "Yes, I am." Well, typically in most of these transactions, I said, "What are you guys looking to get out of it?" She said 150,000. Now I knew that was way too much, but we had a nice conversation. She told me the story about the house and why she's getting rid of it. Well, after I ran my numbers, I came back with a couple different offers. And I was going to pay a little more than I was comfortable with if we could do some creative financing. That didn't work out. So I ended up purchasing it for 85,000. She had like one small debt to pay on it, but she was pretty happy with the price because she got out of the house and she received a nice check because she had already had the house paid off. Now, how I bought this house, I bought it with a hard money loan. So hard money loans, terms vary, but they're very expensive. They're usually like a 10 to 12% interest rate. And in this situation, I had a 10% interest rate and I had to put 10% down. So with closing costs, all in all, I think it was like $9,300 out of my pocket on day one. So now that we've got the purchase out of the way, now it's time for the rehab. So the rehab, I estimated it at about, I think it was about 22,000, 20, somewhere in that range. We ended up going up to about 26, 27 because we made some cosmetic changes we thought would bring some value to the property. And that was adding some doors that we wasn't going to originally add. We was just going to keep the regular doors and just replace the hardware. But after we started to look at it, it looked a lot nicer for the potential renter in the future to have the nicer doors. Maybe get higher rent, maybe get a higher appraisal. So that's why we did that. I always want to try to provide the best property to my tenants as possible. So one thing about the rehab that I did struggle with is finding a contractor that I actually wanted to work with. I had one stand me up. I gave him a second chance. He stood me up again. And then 6 months later, I seen on the news he got arrested for various charges. So I kind of dodged that one. But I did finally find somebody that did most of the work for me at a decent price, and it worked really well. Now, that's a struggle that I've had on almost every single one of my deals is finding a contractor I like. So I continue to try to get better with contractors, and hopefully in the future, that won't be a problem. So like in any deal, when you are going to do the BRRRR method, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat, you'll have to get some tenants in there eventually. So I finally did, after we did all the rehabs, we got a tenant to sign a 12-month lease at $1,400 a month, which was about what I expected when I bought the property. That's about what I expected what it would get. So we was pretty happy with that. So now, after a certain period of time, which they call seasoning, some lenders can ask up to 90 days, some ask up to 180 days. I'm gonna be honest, this was a mistake that I made. I let it set way too long without refinancing it because all the debt was being paid by the rent, and I kind of slipped a little bit and it went longer than I wanted it to. So when I finally went to go do the refinance, we was pretty close to a year. And luckily I worked with my hard money lender long enough that they was fine with me going outside the terms of the 12 months. It cost me a little extra money, like an extra $1,500 to stay in that loan. But this was the beginning of April when we started to do this refinance. A guy approached me at a meetup, a real estate meetup, and he introduced himself. We never personally met, but I had worked with his company before. A deal that we was going to do together actually ended up not happening because one of his employees, it's a long story, but it didn't go well. So he reintroduced himself. I'd never met him in person, and he was just like, "Hey, give me a second chance." So I did great. He said, "I'll get you the best prices. I'll waive your appraisal." And at first, he did. And then comes the appraisal. So my initial thought that it would appraise for about 165, 170,000. And here's where things took a turn. for the best and the worst. So the appraisal came back at 215,000, which is significantly higher than the 170 that I originally predicted. So also, I'm pretty excited about this because this means I can get more cash out of the deal. So here's where the problem with the lender started to happen. I called him. I said, hey, let's rework this loan because now I'm at 215. He said, okay. And then I'm driving in the car and all of a sudden I get notification that my credit's been pulled. Now they've already pulled my credit before and it was slightly below 700, which puts me out of the range of the best terms. So I call, well, I was on the phone with him and I was like, did you just pull my credit? And he's like, yeah. He's like, and good news, you're over 700 now, so we can give you a better loan. I'm like, well, this is getting good. This is going to work. But he's like, unfortunately, we do a rent appraisal, which is a crazy thing. And this is the only company I know it does it. And they said, well, we're going to put down that you only rent it for 1,300, which I already rent it for 1,400. And I have another property right down the street that rents for 1,400, but they say 13. So I'm like, all right, man, whatever. So that puts me at 65% of the ARV I can refinance. I'm going to get about 20,000 out. It should take about 2 weeks at most to get this deal completed. And then here's where the mess really started. 1 week goes by, I hear nothing. 10 days go by, I hear nothing. So finally I call him. I said, hey man, what's going on? He said, we're working on things. Just be patient. So I was patient. 2 weeks go by, still being patient. Working on about week 3, I'm starting to get a little irritated, to be honest. So I call him. He says, oh man, I'm sorry to tell you, but we're asking for an exception from the lender. They don't want to accept your appraisal or your credit score. He's like, but I'm asking for an exception. I'm like, okay, well, this is weird. Never heard this before, but okay. So another week goes by. So now keep in mind, we went from April to May. Another week goes by. So unfortunately, they're not going to do it. So then we have to do another company. So typical DSCR loan could take another 10 days. Now we're 6 weeks in. So now we're in the middle of June. We're working on it. Another week, we're working on it. Now I'm starting to reach out for other companies. And then they hit me with this. Oh, well, you owe $4,300 in back taxes. Now I knew this, they knew this, and they told me that I can pay that at closing and get that closed out. But then they're like, oh, no, we're going to need you to pay it today. So I pay it. Another week goes by. Another week goes by. Now we're going in to July. I tell him, hey man, I said, I'm really going to start looking for other places to do this. And he goes, oh, just give me a little bit of time. And I promise you, on the day that I was going to go with another lender, but I had to get my credit pulled again. And I knew it took a slight dip when you're in business or real estate. Your credit score will fluctuate a lot. So I knew it dropped below that 700. I was like, I don't really want to get it pulled again. Or literally on the day I was going to call him, he said, oh, I think we got it approved now. And I said, okay, so send me all the papers. And it wasn't the best deal, but I had to get it closed. You know, I don't want to ruin my relationship with the hard money lender. So I just went ahead, signed it up. It wasn't a terrible deal. It was probably just about what I was going to get with everybody else, but it was not that deal. I mean, he promised that it was going to be the best deal that I got. He did waive the appraisal, like he said. But I ended up getting about $14,000 back. I would have got a little more back if I would have got that 70%, which is what I really should have got. But like I said, I didn't really want to go redoing the loan for 5%. So the good news is on that, I still got about, 35% of the deal money still in the property. So I'm having low, pretty good margins on it. If something goes wrong, if I need to sell it, it's still, I only owe 140 for it and it's worth about 215. So pretty excited about that. All in all, solid cash flow. Well, it's solid cash flow, but it's not the greatest cash flow. I got money back out. Helps me work on my next deal. So we already have the next deal under contract. So that's pretty cool. We're excited about that. So I hope you learned a little bit. The biggest lessons is don't just trust the guy that says he's going to find you the best deal and expect that you're actually going to get the best deal. But if this kind of real estate is something you're interested in, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and hopefully you can learn something from my mistakes and my wins. And thanks for watching.